Anyone who's ever been involved in the CFA program knows that the ethics book can be one of the most obscure and difficult topics throughout the curriculum. A lot of the ethical questions are pretty straightforward. They're things that just make common sense, but there are many ethics questions that fall within the gray area. They're not black and white, and it really takes some personal decision making to figure out what may or may not be ethical. And after reading a certain scenario, what you decide is the most ethical outcome may not be what the CFA Institute thinks is the most ethical outcome. These ethics issues can be really puzzling, but also kind of fun to think about. So here are a handful of really obscure ethics questions that have been asked in the CFA program. In one scenario, a man named Garcia heard on Squawk Box that an analyst had downgraded a company. He goes ahead and shorts a different company that is in the same industry. The question determined that this was a violation from a material non-public information standpoint. The premise here is that the Squawk Box was not public, so Garcia got some inside information, looked at another stock in the same sector and said, hey, if that stock's going to go down, then this one might go down too. It sort of seems to make sense, but things can get really weird here when you talk about where the line exists in terms of what actions you can't take after hearing some material non-public information that is correlated to another stock. Like maybe it was a stock in the materials industry and he knew it was getting downgraded, so he shorted a different one. That's the violation. But what if the stock that he decided to short was in the industrials industry, for example, which usually is pretty well correlated to materials? Is that also a violation? Because that stock could hold a pretty high correlation to the one he got the non-public information about too. And if that is, then what about a stock in the same industry of a different cap size that may have a lower correlation? Is that still a violation? My thought is that in an instance like this, the institute should have to put a certain number correlation on the stock that you can or cannot make investment decisions based on the material non-public information that you heard. It's not clear how correlated or how uncorrelated a stock would have to be for this to be counted as a violation. In practice, you have to use your own decision making. What you decide could be different from what the institute decides, and now you end up with an ethical violation in an instance where maybe you didn't want to. Of course, you can't say that you shouldn't act on that at all, because like if you heard bad information about an industrial stock and then later you shorted a tech stock because of some totally unrelated thing, they're both stocks. They're both going to share some correlation, but they're not related in that sense. So that should be an okay thing to do, right? So it's like, where is the line? It's kind of a confusing case. So if you have any thoughts on that one, let me know in the comments down below, and also like this video and subscribe. Next, we have a question about Harris, who is a manager for a hedge fund, and he's commonly involved in complex trading strategies on behalf of the hedge fund. He maintains a significant relationship with a brokerage house, which provides portfolio analysis tools to him. Recent market volatility has led to high trading volume and commissions with the brokerage house for that quarter. In appreciation of that business, the brokerage house offers him an all-expense week golf trip at a top resort for him and his wife. Harris discloses the offer to his supervisor, and then compliance, and based on their approval, accepts the big golf trip. And it is noted in the practice question that that is a violation. But then, in a similar question, Alice Adams, a client, offers Harris a one-week cruise as a reward for the great performance of her account over the previous quarter. Burt Baker, also a client, offers him 2 plane tickets to Hawaii if the account beats its benchmark by more than 2% over the following year. And here, Harris, the hedge fund manager, is allowed to accept these even without permission from his employer. He just has to disclose them to his employer. One way to look at this is that the second scenario is actually a worse thing to do from an ethical perspective, because it's aligning a future trip that the hedge fund manager could get based on future performance. That type of an arrangement could influence his investment decision making, cause him to try to take a really high risk play in a certain quarter to meet that performance level to get this next trip. Whereas in the first scenario, the brokerage house was just giving him these benefits for something that he had already incurred because of market events. The CFA Institute's rule here is that gift for past performance from a client just has to be disclosed, but you must receive approval from your employer for a gift for work outside of investing activities. I'm sure there's more details to that. The description here isn't totally explaining it, but kind of an odd one. Here's one that was the craziest thing I can remember reading and studying throughout the ethics book during my time studying in the program. I don't have it in front of me. I couldn't find anything on this, so I'm not going to get it word for word, but this concept was just crazy to me. The question described a scenario in which you're a fund manager and you're going to, I think it was a client dinner or some other type of interaction with a client in which you were expected to uphold a certain level of professionalism. And the question asked about buying a certain item for your wife, and again, I don't remember the specifics here, but it was something for your wife, and how extravagant the certain item could be, I think in use for the client dinner, and what level of extravagance that item could reach before it became a ethics violation. Again, I know my description doesn't make a ton of sense, but I'm just telling you one of the options was a diamond ring, and for whatever reason, after reading the question when I was studying and I was familiar with this stuff, I was like, oh yeah, that would be an ethics violation. So just trust me that this was a question that kind of made sense. Then there was an example that was like, getting the most expensive steak on the menu at this dinner, that obviously wasn't a compliance violation or an ethics violation. I was like, no, that one's probably fine. But option B was like a designer red dress. And in my mind, I was like, no, there's no way that this is an issue. It's a dinner, your wife could wear a dress. But the CFA Institute said that it was an ethics violation in this specific scenario. I just thought it was crazy how specific they're getting with the type of items that you could buy, because different people value different pieces of clothing differently. Like, is a certain wristwatch an ethics violation? Well, if it's a super expensive Rolex, maybe yeah, in that scenario again. But if it was a cheaper watch, maybe not. Okay, well then you should put a dollar figure on it for us so that there's no gray area. They're just not going to do that. And it was, again, a really weird non-black and white situation. Here's one of the questions that'll ask about which ethics standards a person is violating. It says, Michael Malone is an investment analyst for a large brokerage in New York. He covers the airline industry. After hours, in his personal time, he maintains an online blog in which he expresses personal opinions about various investment opportunities, including but not limited to the airline industry. On his blog, he posts a very negative investment opinion about West Air stock. He knows that their stock is going to be downgraded to a sell by his firm next week. Which ethical standard has he violated? And right away, a lot of people are going to say material non-public information, because he knows the stock's going to get downgraded. So if he goes out to his own blog and says, hey, I don't like this stock, and his blog subscribers sell it, and then later it gets downgraded and the price goes down, he's going to look like a genius. It looks like he has material non-public information. But that's wrong. The CFA Institute said that he violated loyalty to his employer. They say by expressing his investment analysis on a personal blog ahead of his employer, he's deprived his employer of the benefits of his skills and abilities, and therefore violated loyalty. Malone did not possess material non-public information about West Air, and no transactions have taken place. Man, I don't know. I mean, it's his research, so I know his employer owns it. He has to be loyal to that respect, but how is telling people to sell a stock before he knows it's going to get downgraded more of a loyalty issue than a material non-public information issue? It's like the Institute saying, well, hey, this isn't actually information about the company, but obviously pertinent opinion downgrades are material non-public information. You can't just go around telling people that something like that's going to happen the next day. So I would get this question wrong 10 out of 10 times on the exam. It's definitely in the gray area in terms of which standard is being more violated here. Throughout the book, there are many, many examples of ethics questions like this where it's just not totally clear in which direction you should be going. You might disagree with what the Institute says. I've just given you a few of them here. If you've ever seen my tips on studying for the CFA exams, I don't really have any great ones for studying for ethics. I feel like it's really obscure, and as much as you study the material through the blue boxes, EOCs, test prep provider, whatever, they're usually more straightforward, whereas I think the questions that it asks on mock exams and real exams are more in the gray area, and formal education of the ethical standards can't really help you decide what's the right answer in all those scenarios. Ethics is just weird, man. They have to make it really hard, otherwise the pass rates would get too high, so I get it, but it's just really, really weird. If you've gotten to this point in the video, it means you watched the whole thing, and I very much appreciate that. Please check out the 3 links in the description down below to some of my other websites if you want to support me there. You can also like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done those things already. Those really help out as well. And as always, thanks for watching.